What would you do if you were cursed to be ugly from birth without any reason? No one understands your pain, and the world turns its back on you. This is what happened to Ngozi in this gripping African folktale. But her story doesn't end there. Ngozi did something no one expected. She found a way to turn her curse into power. Watch until the end to see how she got her sweet, unforgettable revenge on those who wronged her. Today's tale takes place in Ikwere, Nigeria. Where are you watching from? Share any popular stories from your country in the comments. And before we dive in, if you want to join our growing folktale family, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now. Coming soon. Part 5. The Brewing Storm. The whispers in the village had grown louder, and the people of Ikwere were now convinced that Amaka was nothing more than a jealous wife, desperate to tarnish the name of the poor, unfortunate chef who had done nothing but feed their men with delicious food. Many pitied Ngozi, imagining her as a humble woman trying to make an honest living despite her looks. They gossiped about Amaka in the marketplace, their voices dripping with scorn and thinly veiled amusement. It was not every day that a woman would try to bring down another simply because of a handsome husband and a bit of missing jewelry. Amaka felt the sting of those whispers everywhere she went, but she remained steadfast, determined to expose Ngozi for who she truly was. She had no allies now. Her words had been dismissed, and her evidence called into question. Everyone, it seemed, had taken Ngozi's side. Everyone except for Obinna. Obinna, the aging patriarch of Ugana's family, had heard the stories from Amaka's lips and found himself deeply troubled. He was a man who had spent his life surrounded by power and influence, but even he knew the weight of old sins and past mistakes. In the quiet moments of the night, Obinna could not help but remember the witch Adamma's curse upon Ngozi's mother, a curse that had been a direct result of his own ruthless dealings in his younger days. He knew there was more to this than what met the eye, and in his heart, he feared that Ngozi was enacting some terrible revenge against his family. Obinna sought out Amaka in secret, finding her in the courtyard of her home, her face drawn with stress and exhaustion. He approached her with caution, his voice low. "I believe you, Amaka," Obinna said, his eyes earnest. "Ngozi's actions are not random. I suspect she is taking revenge on my family for what I did to her mother. She has targeted us, and I cannot allow her to continue." Amaka's eyes widened, relief washing over her. Finally, someone believed her. "But what can we do? The council won't listen to us, and Ngozi is clever. She covers her tracks too well." Obinna's expression hardened with determination. "There is one person who can help us, Adamma. If anyone knows how to undo this magic, it's her." They made their way to the outskirts of the village, where Adamma's hut sat nestled in the thick foliage of the forest. The old sorceress was waiting, her sharp eyes narrowing as she saw Obinna and Amaka approach. Adamma was a formidable figure, with long gray hair that flowed like a river down her back and eyes that seemed to see straight into the soul. Despite her age, she moved with a grace and authority that demanded respect. Obinna and Amaka explained their plight, detailing every encounter with Ngozi, every strange behavior from Ugana, and the growing suspicion that Ngozi's herbs were behind it all. Adamma listened in silence, her expression unreadable as she absorbed their words. Finally she spoke, her voice rasping like the rustle of dry leaves. "Ngozi's power comes from a place of deep pain and revenge. But it can be undone. There is a drink, a fermented herbal brew that can break the spell. Once drunk, it forces those who have been bewitched to remember everything." Amaka's heart leapt at the revelation. If we can make Ugana drink it, he will remember, and we can finally prove what Ngozi has done. Adamma nodded slowly. "Yes, but there is a catch. The key ingredient is a rare flower that blooms only once a year, and it is blooming now. But it must be picked carefully, for it loses its potency quickly." Without hesitation, Adamma called for her shrine helper, Kai, a lanky teenage boy with bright eyes and quick reflexes. Kai was loyal and agile, often running errands for the sorceress in exchange for small charms and talismans that protected him from misfortune. "Kai, go to the forest and bring me the flower we need," Adamma instructed, handing him a small pouch to keep the delicate bloom safe. "We must prepare the drink before the new Yam Festival. It will be our only chance." Kai nodded obediently and set off down the forest path. But fate had other plans. The next day, as he made his way back with the flower, Kai passed by Ngozi's eatery. Ngozi, always vigilant, had been keeping an eye out for any signs of Adamma's meddling, knowing full well that the old sorceress might pose a threat to her plans. When she spotted Kai, she felt a chill of recognition. Here was a boy from Adamma's shrine, likely on an errand for his mistress. Ngozi's mind worked quickly. She called out to Kai, her voice warm and inviting, the perfect mask for the cold calculations beneath. "Young Kai, come and have some water. You've been walking for so long." Kai, trusting and parched from the heat, accepted the offer, not noticing the faint glimmer of mischief in Ngozi's eyes. She handed him a cup of cool water, but mixed within it was a fine dusting of the herb that had brought so many men under her spell. Kai drank deeply, savoring the coolness of the drink, unaware of the transformation that was about to take place. Ngozi watched him closely, waiting until his eyes glazed over, his expression slack and docile. "Kai," she said softly, leaning in closer, "is Adamma planning anything?" Kai nodded, his voice empty and distant. He told Ngozi everything, revealing the plan to make Ugana drink the herbal concoction at the festival, the flower that had been picked, and the hopes of exposing Ngozi to the entire village. Ngozi's mind raced, anger surging within her. They were closer than she had anticipated, and she had to act quickly to protect herself. She whispered new commands into Kai's ear, her voice low and cunning. Kai's face remained blank, nodding obediently as he absorbed every word. The stage was set, and Ngozi knew what she had to do to remove the threat of Adamma once and for all. Part 6. The New Yam Festival and the Ultimate Betrayal. The New Yam Festival was the most anticipated event of the year in Ikwere, a celebration of the harvest that brought the entire village together in a burst of color, music, and dance. The village square was decorated with vibrant cloths, and the air was filled with the mouth-watering scents of roasted yams, spiced meat, and palm wine. Drummers played energetic beats, and the villagers, dressed in their finest, swayed to the rhythm, their voices raised in joyous song. Obina and Amaka were nervous but hopeful. The herbal mixture, fermenting quietly in Adamma's shrine, was the key to their plan. By afternoon it would be ready, and all they needed was for Ugana to drink it in public. If Ugana remembered everything, he would testify before the entire village, and Ngozi would finally be unmasked. Meanwhile, at the palace, the pre-festival rituals were underway. Adamma and Kai were performing the sacred rites, paying homage to the gods of the harvest. The king's sacred staff, an ornate scepter adorned with carved symbols of power, lay beside them, a symbol of the monarch's authority and the divine blessing of the land. But Kai, under Ngozi's spell, had other plans. As Adamma chanted and sprinkled libations, Kai quietly took the staff, slipping it into his robe. The festival began with great fanfare, but just as the king was about to address his people, a cry rang out. The staff was missing. Panic spread through the crowd. Without the staff, the ceremony could not proceed. It was a symbol of the king's power, and its absence was seen as a grave omen. The search began in earnest, with guards and villagers alike scouring every corner of the palace, but the staff was nowhere to be found. In desperation, the king summoned Adamma, hoping her magic could reveal the thief. Adamma, visibly shaken, called upon the spirits, her hands trembling as she performed her divination. The crowd watched in tense silence as she lifted her ceremonial pot, and there, to everyone's shock, the king's staff tumbled out. The villagers gasped in disbelief. To steal the staff was an unforgivable crime, one that warranted severe punishment. The guards moved swiftly, seizing Adamma as she tried to protest. "This is a setup!" she shouted, her voice cracking with fury and fear. "I would never steal from the king. This is Ngozi's doing." But the crowd was not listening. The king, furious and feeling humiliated, ordered Adamma's immediate arrest. Amaka and Obina, watching the chaos unfold, realized with growing horror that this was Ngozi's plan all along. With Adamma out of the picture, there would be no one to help them expose the truth. "Adamma!" Amaka cried, pushing through the throng of onlookers. "Where is the herbal drink? We need it now." Adamma, struggling against the guards, caught a glimpse of hope and shouted to Kai, "Kai, get the mixture! It's our last chance!" Kai retrieved the fermented brew, holding the small clay vessel in his trembling hands. But as he was about to hand it to Amaka, Adamma made a split-second decision. The potion was limited. It could free only one person. She could save herself and reveal the truth about the staff, or she could save Ugana and expose Ngozi's deceptions, finally clearing Amaka's name. Adamma's mind whirled with the weight of her decision, her fate balanced on the edge of a knife. She could feel the eyes of the entire village on her, waiting for her next move. "Drink it, Kai," Adamma commanded desperately. "Drink it and tell them what you did." Amaka and Obinna gasped in shock, their faces pale with disbelief. "No, give it to Ugana," Amaka pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. "We need to clear my husband's name." Adamma knew the choice she was making. She was sacrificing her last chance to bring Ngozi down. But the accusation of stealing the king's staff was too great, too dangerous. It would ruin her forever if she did not act now. "Drink it," she repeated, her voice filled with a mix of anger, fear, and resignation. Kai stood in the center, holding the small, tightly sealed bottle of the fermented liquid, the one thing that could turn the tide of the day's chaos. The crowd pressed in closer, anticipation electrifying the air as Obinna and Amaka screamed, "Give it to us, Kai! Ugana needs to drink it!" But Adamma, her voice sharp and commanding, despite her shackles, shouted back, "No! Kai must drink it! He is the key to my innocence!" Her eyes were wide with desperation. She knew she had been framed, and the herbal drink would expose the truth if Kai drank it. Confusion tore through the crowd. So far, Ngozi has faced nothing but scorn and pain, but the story is about to take a thrilling turn. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Comment below. Fun fact, did you know that in Ikwer culture, revenge is allowed under certain reasons? If you're enjoying this tale, tap that like button and join our folktale family by subscribing. You won't want to miss what happens next. Some people sided with Obinna and Amaka, while others echoed Adamma's cries. The village was on the verge of breaking into chaos, and the guards tightened their grip on their spears. "Drink it, Kai," Adamma screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of fear. "Drink it and prove my innocence." Obinna's voice roared over hers. "No, give it to Ugana. This is the only way to expose Ngozi for who she really is." Kai hesitated for only a second before lifting the clay vessel to his lips, gulping down the bitter liquid in one swift motion. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Kai's eyes widened, his expression contorting as memories flooded back, everything Ngozi had commanded him to do. In his mind, he saw the day he had been sent to fetch the flower. He had left Adamma's shrine with clear instructions to find the rare plant that bloomed only once a year. But then, he remembered the moment when everything had changed, when Ngozi's voice had pulled him from the path he was supposed to follow. Kai had been walking past Ngozi's eatery that day when she had called out to him, her voice sweet and disarming. "Kai, come, have some water," she had said, her eyes glittering with something he hadn't noticed at the time. He had approached her, his trust naive and innocent, and drank the water she offered. But it hadn't been just water. The moment it had touched his lips, Kai had felt his mind cloud over, like a fog creeping in and dulling his senses. His thoughts became slow, and his will became hers. He could see it now, how she had leaned in, her voice lowering into a dangerous whisper. "Go back," she had murmured, her lips close to his ear. "Go back to where you found the flower, but this time, pick a different one. A flower that looks the same, but isn't." Her voice had coiled around his thoughts like a serpent. "Bring it back to Adamma," and he had obeyed. His memories raced faster now, the next command replaying in his mind with horrifying clarity. "After you've picked the flower," Ngozi had continued, her voice smooth as silk, "you will go to the king's palace. You'll take his staff, the sacred staff, and you'll hide it in Adamma's shrine." Kai dropped the empty vessel, his body trembling as the realization of his actions washed over him. "It was her," he began, his voice weak and cracking. But before he could finish, Kai suddenly clutched his stomach, his face twisting in agony. The crowd erupted into panic as Kai fell to the ground, convulsing violently. Adamma's eyes widened in horror as Kai's body seized and froth bubbled at his lips. She rushed forward, but it was too late. The boy had unknowingly picked a poisonous flower, and the herbal mixture, instead of freeing him, was now tearing him apart from the inside. "No!" Adamma screamed, her voice echoing through the shocked and silent crowd. Kai lay still, his body limp, his eyes staring blankly at the sky above. The villagers recoiled, mothers shielding their children's eyes, elders whispering prayers under their breath. The king, now livid and trembling with rage, pointed at Adamma. "You have poisoned him. You did this to silence him and cover your crimes." Adamma tried to plead her case, but her words were lost in the sea of outrage. It was Ngozi's doing. She controlled him. She replaced the flower. This was all part of her plan. But the villagers would not listen. To them, the evidence was clear. Adamma's pot had held the king's staff, and now her helper was dead at her feet. The king's decree came swift and harsh. "Adamma of the swamp," the king bellowed, his voice heavy with finality, "you are hereby banished from Ikwere. You will leave this land immediately, and you are forbidden from ever returning. Your name will be struck from our stories, and your magic will no longer be welcome among our people." The guards dragged Adamma away, her cries echoing through the village square. As she was led past Amaka and Obinna, she glanced at them one last time, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and defiance. "I'm sorry," she whispered, knowing that in her desperate attempt to save herself, she had failed them all. Amaka and Obinna stood in stunned silence, their hopes dashed. The mixture was gone, Adamma was banished, and the one person who could have testified was dead. Amaka felt the weight of her husband's lost memories pressing down on her like a crushing stone. Ugana remained entranced, oblivious to the danger he had narrowly escaped, but still trapped in Ngozi's web. Ngozi watched from a distance, her face a mask of calm satisfaction. She had played her hand perfectly, using Kai to dismantle her enemies without lifting a finger. With Adamma gone and Amaka's credibility shattered, Ngozi knew she was untouchable. She had outsmarted them all, and now there was no one left who could challenge her. As night fell over Ikwere, the village tried to resume the festival, but the joyous spirit had been drained away, replaced by a lingering sense of unease. The king's staff had been recovered, but the shadow of the day's events hung heavy over the celebrations. Families whispered anxiously among themselves, glancing nervously at the space where Adamma had once stood, wondering what kind of magic had woven its way through their lives. Ngozi returned to her eatery, where the flickering lamplight cast eerie shadows on the walls. She sat alone, the noise of the distant festival fading into the background. She thought of her mother, of the curse that had shaped her life and driven her to this point. Ngozi had not sought power out of greed, but out of necessity, to claim the love and respect that had been denied to her since birth. Yet even as she basked in her victory, Ngozi knew that her game was far from over. She had won this battle, but she had made powerful enemies in the process. Obinna, Amaka, and the remnants of Adamma's influence would not rest easily, and she would have to stay vigilant. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph, savoring the sweet taste of revenge that had been years in the making. As the night deepened, Ngozi leaned back, her thoughts drifting to the future. She had come so far, and she was not finished yet. With Adamma gone and her enemies in disarray, Ngozi was free to expand her influence, to tighten her grip on the village that had once scorned her. She would build an empire of loyalty, one meal at a time, one whispered command at a time. And though the road ahead was fraught with danger, Ngozi knew one thing for certain. She would never be the powerless girl she once was. She was the architect of her destiny, and nothing, no curse, no rival, no vengeful spirit would stand in her way. Part 7. The Last Trick. Ngozi's eatery thrived more than ever, becoming the town's hub for traders, elders, and curious passersby, all lured in by the rich scent of her spiced dishes. With her remaining herbs dwindling, Ngozi carefully rationed them, using just enough to keep the men under her influence without wasting any of her precious stash. It was a delicate dance, and her wealth grew with each passing day as men left her eatery lighter in pockets, yet without memory of their own generosity. But beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. The whispers about her fortune and strange ways reached Obinna, who was still bitter about his failed attempts to expose her and redeem his family's honor. Angered by the humiliation his family had suffered and determined to stop her reign, he decided to send a group of thugs to her eatery at nightfall. Their mission was simple: steal everything valuable and leave no trace of who was behind it. That evening, as Ngozi sat counting her earnings in the dim light of her back room, she heard the faint shuffle of footsteps outside. Her heart raced as she peered through the small window and saw shadows moving in the dark. Realizing the danger, she quickly gathered a few valuables. But as she turned to flee, the door was kicked open, and 4 rough-looking men stormed in, each armed with a club or dagger. With quick reflexes, Ngozi grabbed the pouch of herbs, but in her haste, she accidentally spilled some near the small cooking fire. The dried leaves caught in the flames, creating a thick, smoky haze that spread through the room in seconds. She tried to cover her face and hold her breath, but the thugs breathing in the smoke suddenly stopped in their tracks, their eyes glazing over as if they were in a trance. Taking advantage of the situation, Ngozi stepped forward, her eyes sharp and piercing as she spoke. "Who sent you?" she asked, her voice laced with anger. The thugs, their minds caught in the thrall of her herbs, responded in unison. "Obinna, he sent us to take everything you have." Ngozi's expression darkened as the truth sank in. So Obinna had finally struck. She clenched her fists, her mind racing with thoughts of vengeance. Obinna had tried to humiliate her, destroy her business, and banish her back to the shadows. But now, with one final blow, she would make sure that he paid the ultimate price. The next morning, Ngozi prepared a dish more potent than any she had made before. She cooked it carefully, seasoning it with the last of her magical herbs, knowing that her plan had to be flawless. She summoned Chidi, Obinna's trusted houseboy, a quiet young man always eager for extra money, and explained his task. She paid him handsomely to deliver the meal to Obinna, instructing him to say it was a gift from a grateful elder. "If anyone asks, say nothing. Just give him the food," she whispered, her tone smooth and reassuring. "And after he eats, tell him to pack his bags and leave town forever." Chidi agreed, tucking the pot under his arm as he made his way to Obinna's house. However, as he approached the compound, Obinna happened to spot him through the window. Noticing the unusual pot, Obinna's suspicions stirred. He quickly approached Chidi before he entered, his eyes narrowing. "Where did you get that pot, Chidi?" he asked, his tone wary. Chidi hesitated, caught off guard. "It was a gift, sir, from an elder." But Obinna wasn't convinced. He grabbed the pot, placing it firmly in Chidi's hands, and with a shrewd smile, he said, "Then eat from it. Prove to me it's safe." Chidi's eyes widened in fear, but he dared not disobey. Trembling, he lifted the pot to his lips and took a bite. Within moments, his expression turned vacant, and his limbs slackened as the herb spell took hold. Obinna watched, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. He leaned close to Chidi, whispering his own commands into his ear. "Tell Ngozi that I am gone. Tell her you need more money for the trouble. Then bring back whatever she gives you. You will remember nothing of this tomorrow." With the commands locked in Chidi's mind, Obinna released him, watching as the young man, now under his control, turned and walked back toward Ngozi's hut. That evening, Ngozi heard a knock on her door and opened it to find Chidi standing there, looking pleased and somewhat tired. "It is done, madam," he said, his voice hollow but obedient. "Obinna has left the village as you wished, but it was not easy. I need more for my troubles." Ngozi's heart leapt with satisfaction. She had finally rid herself of the man who had caused her mother's curse and plagued her life with suffering. "Wait here," she said, her voice brimming with triumphant joy as she turned to her room to fetch more payment. When she returned moments later, however, Chidi was gone. She looked around, confused, wondering if he'd decided to leave before receiving his reward. She shook her head, thinking nothing more of it, too pleased with her success to let anything dampen her mood. But later that night, a strange feeling gnawed at her, an inkling that something was amiss. On a hunch, she went to her stash, carefully hidden beneath a loose floorboard where she had kept the remaining herbs she'd rationed so carefully. Her heart sank when she lifted the board. The pouch was gone. Her pulse quickened, panic blooming in her chest. The herbs, the very last of her power, were nowhere to be found. Realizing the only explanation, her mind raced with fury. Chidi must have taken them under some unknown compulsion. But why? Meanwhile, Chidi, still under Obinna's spell, made his way back to his master's house, the pouch of herbs clutched tightly in his hand. He entered the compound, his eyes glassy and distant as he handed over the herbs. Obinna looked at the herbs in his palm, his lips curling into a satisfied smirk. His plan had worked perfectly, and he finally held the secret to Ngozi's power. The herbs that had ensnared his son, driven away his friend Adamma, and humiliated his family were now his. And with the same leaves that had caused him so much suffering, he would bring Ngozi to her knees. As Obinna stood in his darkened room, clutching the herbs, he felt a grim sense of satisfaction. At last, the tables had turned. With the herbs in his possession, he could undo all that she had done, or even better, give her a taste of her own bitter medicine. And so, in the quiet of his hut, Obinna smiled to himself. He was ready for his revenge. Coming soon in Chapter 3. Just when it seemed like Ngozi was finally winning in life, Obinna now has her magical herbs, which can make anybody that eats it or smells its smoke under his command. You would not believe the horrible things he does to Ngozi with this new power. And how will Ngozi get her power back? Subscribe and turn on notifications to find out how. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. I'm a new channel that loves storytelling, so if you enjoyed this chapter of Ngozi's journey, hit like, share this story with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to see Chapter 2. Trust me, you won't want to miss the shocking twist that's coming. See you in the next chapter.